Hi everyone, my name is Megan Nelson. This is my capstone research proposal. I am going to be investigating if there is one specific personality trait that is more successful during interviews than others. Just to give you a little bit of background information regarding this capstone research, the themes of this are obviously interviews and personality traits, types, and theories, just because there's not one specific way that we determine personality. And so we're going to be focusing on the interview process because interviews are primarily used to obtain jobs and professional program entrance. So we have to interview for just about everything in life, any job we want, any continuing education we want. Every time we meet someone, it's basically an interview. And we always want to put our best foot forward because that's how we get the position, we get the job, we get accepted into this program. And so we're always interviewing for something. There are a few tips and tricks that you can find on the internet or from friends of how to be more successful in interviews, and they're typically focused on your presentation, making sure that you have done the work to research the company and you can align with the company's mission and goals, and just to make sure that you're the most prepared as possible, but they don't focus on how you can make yourself the best and present yourself in the best way, aside from very generalized tips. It doesn't go as far as being like, oh, you're mostly an extrovert, so we're going to use that to your benefit because we know you're outgoing and we're going to make that your strong point. Also, interviews combine all aspects of psychology. You have communication because you're talking to people, it's interpersonal relationships because you're going to build that relationship, and the interviewer is going to determine if you are right for that position, if you have that cultural fit for the company or for the program, or that you would be successful in getting to the next step. So interviews can be so terrifying and difficult. Everyone's always very nervous. You never know what to expect. Even if you've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of times, each program, each company, each interviewer is different. And that's one of the things that can make this such a difficult idea. So we're also going to do personality types, traits, and theories because they've been linked to various behaviors, motivation, success. We have done a lot of research in personality and linked it to just about everything we can and determined, oh, certain personality types are better for this, or they warrant this behavior, or this the reason behind different things. And we use them to characterize individuals and then guide them. So if you're really strong in one aspect, you can work on your weaknesses in the other aspects, but you can also use that strength, which is one of the best parts about this. Okay, so why does this matter? Why do we care if one personality type is more successful in an interview? Think about this. What if society could improve the success rate of interviews by understanding personality types? We could use these strengths and these advantages to ensure that we get the jobs we want, we get into the program we want, because we're using our strength and we know what interviewers are looking for. So as interviewees, we've already set ourselves up for success. Also, as interviewers, we can understand that one personality type may be better for a specific job, for a specific program, for whatever we're looking for, and we can evaluate based on that, because you may have 10 applicants that all have the same on paper qualities, but one's more personable. If you're getting into medical school, you want a doctor that's more personable, someone that's more reliable. You have hundreds and hundreds of candidates that are all the same on paper. They're all really smart, they all do really well, they all try really hard. But how many of them are actually going to be able to connect with the patients? And how many of them are actually going to be able to give the patients the care they deserve, the care they need, the care that they're willing to go back for? Since the workforce is going to be continuously turning over, we need to set the next generation up for success. Research into personality characteristics of successful interviews will provide beneficial resources to those entering the workforce for the first time, making a change in their career path, and it's going to better themselves, better ourselves, and obtain a job or any avenue of pursuit that we want. We're going to get that acceptance, get that job, that program, any of it if we can set ourselves up for success. And one of that ways could be learning that a personality type is just better in interviews. We could also understand that maybe we don't have that personality type, but we can still set ourselves up for success by knowing that this is our disadvantage and it's something that we need to overcome. So, what do we already know? We know that there's hundreds of thousands of different personality traits, types, and categories that we could evaluate. For this project, I have focused on the Big Five personality theory. However, there were quite a few evaluations where they focused on different traits such as self-efficacy, and that was put into one of the Big Five traits. So the Big Five traits are agreeableness, openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism. And we know that. We have all done research in psychology. We've all learned that these are kind of these overarching themes to personality. Upon research, most commonly, extroversion has shown the most significant positive correlation in interview success. So people that were really outgoing, really personable, could make that connection with the interviewer, were the most likely to be successful in their interviews. Conscientiousness explained a variance in the number of interviews, but didn't exactly correlate to the interview success. So it played a part in how many interviews they got or how few interviews they got based on their paper application, but didn't tell us if they were successful because of this or not successful because of this. Neuroticism did play a primary role in the significance of interview preparation, so those that have a higher instance of neuroticism were more prepared for their interviews, but it didn't show a significant correlation to the interview success. However, individuals that are more prepared for an interview and they have high neuroticism levels would be more successful just because of the level of preparedness. They have focused on what the mission is, what the mission statement is, how it applies to them, made sure that their application was all set up, made sure that they were putting their best foot forward. They weren't just kind of jumping in all willy-nilly. Agreeableness also provided a positive correlation to an interview success. So people that were very agreeable to the interviewer, they were a yes man mostly. However, just kind of saw the perspective, took that information in, kind of made it their own, whether it is actually or not, and then regurgitated that information to the interviewer to where the interviewer thought that they were very agreeable, and so forth. There was no correlation to openness to experience, which makes a lot of sense. These interviews are super short. They're 20, 30 minutes to try and get a whole life story. And you're not going to get a whole life story because most people's lives are very messy and very dirty. So you're not going to get all the nitty gritty and weird things out in an interview. You're going to get the best of that person. So being open to new experiences, they may say, I don't mind doing this, I don't mind doing that, I would love to try, but I've never tried this. And some of that's being agreeable. They really want this job, they really want into this program, so they're going to want these things. When they get down to it, are they actually going to want these things? We don't know, and there's no correlation to show that it made them more successful in the interview. How am I going to add value to this topic? So I am not a researcher. I don't claim to be a researcher. I'm just a master's student that put together this project, and I thought it was really interesting because society needs more concrete evidence to support improvements to the success of interviews. Interviews are kind of like baseball, where you have a really low average. Sometimes you have a really great average, sometimes you have a really poor day. All of these things need help. They need more evidence to support it. The evidence that I found was pretty limited. It focused on the Big Five, so it didn't focus on any additional attributes. However, there was enough to at least get everyone started. Psychologists could provide a new tool for interviewees and interviewers to use during the process based on psychological research. So a lot of what we try and do, we try and base what we use, the tools we have, on research, things that are proven to work. And this is what we could do. This is just another tool that we could use in our toolbox to make us successful, make the next generation successful. And that's all we're really looking for. We want everyone to be successful because as a society, if we're successful, so is the next generation. So is the next generation. And we don't have the problems that we may incur. There's a link that already exists between personality types, traits, and theories and the success of interviews. Granted, this is mostly on college students, so not too much information on those that have decided to change careers or change jobs, but the link exists, and we just need more support for it because it's kind of a weak link right now. And so the more evidence we can pile on top, the more often we can use this, and the more often we can kind of include everyone to use these and be more successful. I have set up a research design, and for this design, we're obviously going to evaluate if and which personality traits are more successful in interviews. But for that, we're going to need a lot of information. And so taking a mixed method approach is going to be the best way to approach this topic. Using both quantitative and qualitative research questions are going to give us the most amount of detail. There can be some quantitative answers, such as how many jobs they applied for, how many interviews they got, how many secondary interviews they got, or acceptances they got, but that's pretty limited information. We don't know why they were successful. We can also gather their information on the big 5 personality traits if we want to, or different personality traits that we put forth. And those are some quantitative questions, but for the most part, a lot of this is qualitative. It's kind of a gray area. So how was the perspective? How were they feeling that day? Do they felt that one personality trait came out more in an interview? I know that when I interview, I am much more extroverted than I would typically be because I really want that job. I really want to be excited, and I typically am excited for something that I'm interviewing for. Then there can be additional data that we can collect. We can use case studies, we can use other research reports, we can even get philosophy involved because there is quite a good amount of philosophies that can be incorporated into psychology and kind of intermingle some ideas. So for this research, Qualtrics is an online survey tool that's used to obtain data. You can get both quantitative and qualitative information, so it's just a wonderful tool. And being that the participants are going to be mostly online or Southern New Hampshire University students that are willing to take the survey because it's a convenient sample, online is going to be such a big advantage for us. And Qualtrics is a pretty easy to use, pretty easy to read survey site. They also are able to import directly into IBM SPSS, which is the statistics that we can use for data analysis. This is mostly going to be for the quantitative measures. They'll be able to tell us how many jobs each person was, and it's anonymous, so I can't tell who took the survey, what they're like. It doesn't tell me any of that. It just tells me that these were the numbers, and it'll tell me whether or not they finished the survey or not. Now for the qualitative measures, I could generate all that data and go through. However, there'd be a bias because I really want this research to work. So using an outside source for analysis is going to be most beneficial. They don't really care about my project. All they're there for is to categorize the qualitative measures so that I can then go and get the results and kind of interpret them to see whether or not the hypothesis was correct. So there's no point in doing research if there's not some sort of real-world application that we can use. Obviously, we have to interview for most things that we do in life, and so there is a real-world application for this, but it's going to provide valuable insight into how we can be more successful in job interviews because everyone goes into a job interview, or most people at least, want that job. They want entrance into that program. This is the whole reason they've put their best foot forward. And so to not get the job or to not get accepted is very disheartening and sometimes actually crushing. And so we want to set ourselves up for success, and this is just another tool that we could do that with. We're also going to provide a better understanding for the strengths and weaknesses of both ourselves and personalities during an interview process. There is some information, not great information, but some information that tells us that some are more advantageous. But what about the ones that aren't advantageous? How do we overcome that and make sure that we're still getting the job we want, even if we're not an extrovert, even if we aren't super agreeable? Also, we're going to perform at a higher capacity during the interview with this knowledge. This knowledge sets us up for success, even just knowing it, because we understand that there is going to be this dynamic and we're aware of it. So we're trying to put our best foot forward. We're using all the tools in our toolbox. And even as interviewers, we can still perform at a higher capacity during this interview process. Of course, with any good study, there's always limitations. So there are so many potential biases and false answers that could become from social desirability. Everyone wants to look good on paper. Everyone wants to be perfect. And unfortunately, that's just not our society. However, we've gotten to this place where we want to look perfect and we want to make sure that no one sees us fail. So the biases and the false answers and all the incorrect information that I'm given is kind of a pain because it's not going to tell me whether or not they really got this way. So one of the potential improvements would be to do interviews or to record actual interviews and kind of pull the information that way, probably from a third party, because if I were to do it, there would be even more biases because I really want this study to work. So the primary focus for this is the Big Five personality traits. It disregards all other personality theories, which is a huge limitation because the Big Five is the most overarching personality theory there is, but there's so many different variations. There's so many additional things that we could look at. Most of them we can categorize in some weird way into one of the Big Five, but to do them individually would be phenomenal. Also, it'd be a lot of work, so let's start small. Another limitation for this is going to be the limited population. So just like the previous studies, I'm only examining college students, people that are entering the workforce for the first time. So I don't know how many interviews they've had. Maybe they had jobs in high school and they've been interviewing all their life. Maybe they only had their entrance interview to their college and that's been it. So I'm kind of limiting myself in the population. I also don't have individuals who are changing careers because they're very interesting and that would be a huge bonus. So some students may be doing that. However, for the most part, these students are young, straight into college, straight out of college, entering the workforce individuals. So I know I haven't done any research yet, but these would be some areas where future research could go. I set up my design to focus on what we know and just get more evidence, but I also found that there are so many other areas that we could focus on that would provide us even more information. So knowing the connection between the Big Five personality traits is a big place we could focus our research. It produces some limited results, which is why I want to go back and do more studying in it so that we can get more concrete results and we can build kind of a general foundation before we build up to these other fun things. So we can also expand that research for other theories of personality traits and determining the differences and similarities between the current research, if there is any research, and then build that foundation. From here, it'd be super fun to focus our efforts between personality and interviews to interviews of different organizations. So tech people and medical and educational, each one of those organizations needs a certain personality type. Tech people are usually a little more conscientious. They're a little less open to experience. They're a little more introvert. And that's really good because they're so smart and they are so fantastic at what they do that we need those. But I've also noticed that they're very different from those that go into education or those that go into medicine. They choose that because it aligns with their goals, it aligns with their personality, and it aligns with their passions. And that's something that is different for everyone and something that we can connect to personality, which is such a benefit, especially if we can explore it more. and we can get more focused research in these areas, and then we can set the next generation up for even more success because they can know, oh, I'm going into a medical interview. Medical is really high in agreeableness and really high in extroversion, and they really want people that care about what they do. And they can set themselves up for that because they have that focus. I'm super excited for the next steps, and I would actually really love to do this research, so I may continue and pursue additional things once this course ends, because this actually got me really excited about personality types and about interview success. And I don't do that much interviewing, but I know that it's going to be an advantage, and it's going to be an advantage across the board because this is what we do all the time. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. The next slide will be references and contact information. If you have any questions or concerns or want to chat about this, I would love to talk to you guys. Thanks.